For more on what we're witnessing and what should happen, Chris Bedford joins us now. He's senior politics editor and D.C. correspondent for The Blaze. And he points out that Mitch McConnell, while his health may be failing, he's waging some sort of vigorous war against Donald Trump for some reason. Chris, good to have you back with us, sir.
Great to be here, Vince.
Okay, so first and foremost, you've brought this point up before, that the United States of America has leaders who are way older than the eldest Soviet leaders ever were during the Cold War, and yet we're told we have to deal with it.
We are. They are white-knuckle gripping to power. And, it's caused a lot of problems. You see this on the Democratic side as well, where because of the unwillingness to surrender control to a younger generation, their insistence in leaders of both parties that the next generation just can't take control, can't take power, can't step in. There's been a gap on the bench of rising talent. Democrats are dealing with this issue right now in particular as people try to fight over who's in charge. And you think there might be some obvious leaders like Hakeem Jeffries, but everyone knows that Nancy Pelosi still kind of runs the House of Representatives. And the same is true often in the Senate. Even though he's a much younger man, John Thune is a very close ally of Mitch McConnell. And that's kind of the style that these things have continued on in. And everyone has elderly relatives or is going through aging themselves. Medical issues become more and more prominent, but usually, especially when you're able to, people retire, and that does not seem to be the case with old Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, I mean, lots of people try and retire at the top of the game, like when they realize they're on the downward swing. And yet McConnell's not doing that. What is that? Is there a psychological reason for it? Is he benefiting financially by staying in the job? I mean, what could possibly motivate him to just keep doing this forever?
I think it's the same kind of psychological illnesses that you see affecting most politicians. They love power. They love the interest. And, it can be difficult for some politicians and military generals too have to deal with this when they resign because, well, Mitch McConnell himself is wealthy. A lot of other politicians are not, and their job is to hang out with extremely wealthy and powerful people all day. They're always in the company of multimillionaires, of billionaires, of people who have the independent wealth. And when you leave that power behind, and when you leave a high-ranking post in the military or in the American civilian government, the convoys end, the helicopter trips end, the police details end, the access to anywhere you want starts to end, and you have to actually face a normal kind of human life. I think a lot of people don't want to do that. But Mitch McConnell in particular is really worried about the Republican agenda that the American voters have selected. He's got a different foreign policy than Donald Trump and a lot of people who work closely with Donald Trump, with the vice president to Donald Trump, J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
And he wants to make sure that this is not going to change. I mean, he just gave an interview that came out earlier today where he compared the America First MAGA agenda to the isolationists in the 1930s, which is, because they had the same slogan. You'd hear America First. I don't think it should be too controversial to say that your own country should take priority. But the connotation here is that this is the kind of policy that leads to Hitler's. It leads to Holocausts. It leads to World War II's, World War III's. And he's strongly insinuating that. He wants to fight to the bitter end to change Trump's agenda on Ukraine. He wants to make sure that American involvement continues or escalates in the Middle East. And he's willing to stick around to fight for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty rich coming from, the people who advanced us into the Iraq War and the people who normalized trade relations with China to the point that it's hurt us dramatically. For Mitch McConnell to say something like that. And I love that it's the same sort of classic moral blackmail that we hear from so many in the Washington establishment. If you're not on their side, then you must be on the side of bigotry. There's a moral failing on your part if you're not on their side in an agenda that has not done much good for the United States.
No, the country since the 90s really has been coasting. The economic systems and the trade regimes that have been put in have decimated the American middle class. It's hurt real wages. It's hurt employment. It's hurt the whole country in general. And at the same time, they've just been launching the country into conflict after conflict, never really with any clear off-ramp. never any actually easily attainable or really realistically attainable
Yeah.
objectives, the kind of things that you usually want to have when you enter a war. And they're unwilling to recognize the damage that they've caused and that their philosophies have caused. And it's coming to roost. I think that's what world leaders were really recognizing with Donald Trump when we just saw him over at the reopening of Notre Dame, which was kind of a wonderful moment. But in 2016, when he won, he was considered an aberration. He was considered the spray tanned kind of American decline. What a strange figure. Well, now it's clear he's back. And he's back with a majority of Americans supporting him, knowing full well who he is. And they're realizing that it's far from an aberration. This is where a lot of people want the country. They think that
Yes.
something's gone wrong.
Yes.
And they want to change it. And he's the future.
Yeah, he reflects the mood of the country really clearly. And Mitch McConnell, I'm looking at his failing health, and I'm listening to what you're describing, which is that he's waging this war on Trump and Trump's agenda, and more importantly, the agenda of Trump's voters. And I'm thinking, how does this guy have any energy for this at all? If you were to ask me today, like, hey, could you mount a war against a politician? It takes a lot of work. There's a lot of effort in putting something like that together. And Mitch McConnell is not a man of abundant energy. I don't know if you've seen the videos of him walking around the Capitol. And yet, whatever little energy he has, he's fully devoting it to taking down Trump's agenda? That's insanity.
And he has a lot of power, though. It's not just, he's got the power that comes just as being an institution in the Senate and formerly being a leader, his ability to recommend things to other senators, which you see him do frequently. You don't see him often on the forefront of these battles. When Tommy Tuberville, for example, was holding up promotions to the Pentagon, something we talked a lot about in this show, because of their illegal abortion policies, you didn't see Mitch McConnell mention in all the coverage that the Republicans had turned on him, but he was in the background telling people, hey, you want this to happen? Why don't you step up? Why don't you take the lead? You saw it also with the completely disastrous immigration deal. His name wasn't on it. You heard it in every single Democratic talking point after that. But he pushed Langford into that position. It was his idea. And, of course, he disappeared when that started to happen. And now you see Joni Ernst is taking a whole lot of grief. She's a longtime Trump loyalist, McConnell loyalist. She's taking all kinds of grief for pushing back against Pete Hegseth. But that's another McConnell move. That's something he wants. And you don't see his name in the press, and you don't see him meeting either with Hegseth.
So for now, what are our options, Chris Bedford? Because Mitch McConnell is in a state with a Democrat governor. If he were to resign his seat, which he obviously has shown no appetite for, God forbid, if his health were to fail so much that he was removed by virtue of some sort of health episode, what do we do? I mean, that means Andy Beshear has the power to replace him?
That's my understanding of what would happen, and that's another reason why I don't think he's going to go anywhere. We've seen senators, we just recently saw with Dianne Feinstein, hang on much longer than their mental acuity hangs on, or their physical body seems to be willing to hang on. And I suspect that's what we're going to see with Mitch McConnell. Well, there are rumors swirling right now. I mean, reporters are calling different Senate offices asking about retirement rumors, and there are stories and pictures coming out that show an even worse situation than what we're talking about right now, kind of a Joe Biden-esque ambling around the halls, a lot of people having to help him out. That, we've learned in modern American politics, does not actually mean resignation is around the corner.
Yeah, so we're waiting to see what happens with him. Meanwhile, John Thune is obviously, as you pointed out earlier in this conversation, very close to Mitch McConnell. He's been, as much of a McConnell loyalist perhaps as anybody might be. What do you make of John Thune right now? President Trump did all of these senators a favor by sitting out the Senate leadership race. He didn't make an endorsement, despite the fact that Rick Scott was in that race and clearly was the best reflection of Trump's voters among the three who were up there. It was Cornyn, Thune, and Scott. Do you think Thune is trying to sort of navigate these two worlds between Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump and keep everybody happy? What does the future look like with John Thune as leader?
Yes, I think he's going to try and navigate that. He's not quite as feisty in that way as Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell's a man who at this point considers he's got nothing to lose. except for his legacy. He's actually, well, I completely disagree with him on almost everything. These are things that he believes in. These are things he wants to fight for, whereas Thun's going to try and have to navigate a much more political, realistic realm. But he's going to have to prove over the next few months that he is his own man, because previously he has definitely been someone who could loyally be counted on to support whatever McConnell wants. He's going to have to show that he's willing to buck McConnell. And
Yes.
if McConnell continues down the path with the interview he gave today, which is kind of wild, that was published today, if he continues being that aggressive towards President Trump, I suspect that's going to force an actual open break. Because it's one thing to have McConnell in the background tinkering with things, messing with things, trying to reassert his control over D.C. It'll be another if it comes down to a head-to-head confrontation between a former leader and the sitting president.
Well, the first big fight is all of these confirmations. That's really the first big Senate fight. And John Thune came out, I think it was last week now, and began to be one of the voices that was trying to basically tell the rest of the establishment, hey, Trump's picks are good. They deserve a hearing. We shouldn't let the media control all of this. So Thune is starting to say the right things. And that's, to me, and maybe perhaps to you, I'll get your answer on this, kind of seems like it's a clear indication that President Trump is at least working behind the scenes to say, hey, look, I didn't get involved in that race, but now that you're the guy, you need to stick with me and my voters.
And that's been Trump's style from day one. People think that he just goes out and picks random fights, but he doesn't. He picks fights with people who pick fights with him. He's reactionary in that level. He is always going to punch back against someone in his own party, someone who may even be considered untouchable, like previously the Bush family was, or the late Senator McCain was. He's going to go toe-to-toe with those sorts of people. He doesn't care about those sort of trappings or what's appropriate or what's not. So Thune's going to have to recognize that. And it seems like Republican senators are starting to get that memo as well. They were able to push back against Gates. I think his issues were myriad, much more than just simple ideology. But when they tried to do the same thing with Hegseth, you saw a shift. And now you see different things like Tulsi Gabbard sitting down with Marco Rubio's endorsement. Well, Marco Rubio, he's shifted his political ideas over the last decade or so. He's probably less hawkish than he used to be. He doesn't have the same foreign policy as Tulsi Gabbard. So that's an interesting show that people are willing to say, you're the president, you get the picks that you want.
By the way, just an update for you. I just got a note from Ted. I appreciate this. It says just an update on, Kentucky's legislature did pass some veto-proof legislation, even with Andy Beshear in charge, that this past year that made a change to how vacancies in the U.S. Senate are filled. This is over the objections of Andy Beshear. The Republican-sponsored bill would require a special election to choose a senator in the case of an open seat in the unexpired term, passed with bipartisan support as the legislature nears the end of its session. It passed both chambers with veto-proof majorities. It's a significant change from how the process currently works, Politico wrote earlier this year. A majority of states pick successors in vacant Senate seats by gubernatorial appointment. But there are some notable restrictions in the Commonwealth. The governor must choose a nominee from a list of 3 names that the outgoing senator's party submits. Beshear would have to choose a Republican should either Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell or Senator Rand Paul's seats become vacant. So that's how it works in Kentucky. But even that process suggests to me that if McConnell has a say, he may very well be handpicking his own successor on that list. So there's a lot of room for shenanigans.
Absolutely, and he will have a say. He's still holds a lot of respect. He may be literally the most unpopular senator, according to the broader public in the country. But he still holds a lot of sway in his state party.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, Chris Bedford over at The Blaze, thank you as always for your time and your wisdom. Good to talk to you today.